Sean Smith, and welcome to Story2021.co. I'm here today with our excellent speaker, Casey Botticello, who is going to talk to us about digital publishing platforms, including Substack and Medium. I discovered Casey on Medium. He was one of the first writers that I followed when I started using Medium earlier this year. And he has tremendous insights into Medium, into publishing, into self-publishing. And I'm going to turn it over to him. Casey, why don't you tell us about your background and how you got involved with the digital publishing platforms in the first place?
Yeah, sure. And thanks for having me, Sean. As you said, the first platform I kind of was investigating or trying to figure out if there was any merit to was Medium. And I basically, like a lot of people, I think, stumbled across Medium myself as a reader. The articles tend to index well in Google because of the high domain authorities. So I was, aware of Medium since probably 2014, but I didn't actually start writing on there and publishing content until about mid 2018. And at the time I was working for a PR and lobbying firm, and this was just me on the side, sort of writing articles, experimenting with different topics to see if they gain any traction. And my first article on Medium, which was how to form a super PAC, did really well and actually outranked the FEC's election guide manual in the Google search for a long time. So I realized kind of the early power of Medium just sort of for promotion. But then I sort of found the community of writers, and I sort of, got deeper and deeper into the digital publishing scene from there.
That's cool. So really 2018 to present has been the arc.
Well, yeah. So prior to 2018, I was big on self-publishing on Amazon KDP. I think I had published somewhat like over a 2-year period. I assembled a team and we basically created test instructional manuals and practice exams for all sorts of vocational tests. And I think we published something like 200 books. So I had some experience in that I was creating content, but like I said, that was just like it wasn't under my name, it wasn't about building a brand. It was really about just creating a targeted product, a digital product that would sell. So Medium was more my, first time trying to actually build a brand and sort of showcase some of the, different things that I had learned in my 10 years sort of digital marketing experience.
And when did you become fully self-employed digital nomad?
So it was in 2018 that I started doing. I didn't have like a full-time job anymore. I was working with the same lobbying and PR firm, but as a consultant, and that allowed me to travel. And since I no longer had to be anywhere specifically for that, I kind of went around the US and explored a lot of the Southwest specifically. And, like I said, kind of did the whole digital nomad thing for about a year. I was still, though, kind of, working for a fairly traditional company for that next year or so. It wasn't really till 2019 when I kind of fully severed ties with sort of the original clients that I had and made more room for all the different entrepreneurial ventures full time.
Nice. That's interesting. Then we get to 2020 and the great accelerator. And what I've talked about is that we find ourselves in the midst of the greatest content boom since the Renaissance. Talk to me about what's happening with digital content.
Yeah, so there's no question that like my background was useful prior to 2020, but as you said, I kind of got lucky basically on the timing. This was an unusual surge that I think lifted a lot of people that were in the digital marketing and publishing space. Um, First I noticed that just in terms of like the sheer amount of online activity during the pandemic, that was obvious as towards the second half of the year. But even before that, there were a lot of new players that had entered the market or were starting to more aggressively market themselves, like Substack, and basically not direct competitors to sites like Medium, but just all different vehicles for monetizing digital content. So, you had all of a sudden everybody had a subscription newsletter. That was something that would have been pretty unusual a year or two ago. I certainly don't think people would have, paid for it unless it was really somebody who was like a big name journalist or something. So I personally blogging, I have my own newsletter, which is kind of how I built the brand. And I'm right around 250 paid subscribers, which to me is just absolutely phenomenal. I I definitely subscribe to the, Kevin Kelly's original thousand true fans theory, and I'm a big believer that you focus on sort of creating a micro community, finding people that share interests and are willing to support what you find, what you're passionate about, basically. And prior to the internet, finding 1,000 people that cared about some obscure niche topic was pretty hard. But with the rise of the internet and digital publishing, yeah, it's not that hard to find those people. So it's opened this whole floodgate of sort of broadly termed passion economy, newsletters, courses, and all sorts of other products.
Explain the passion economy.
Yeah, I don't know if it's the formal definition of it, but I would describe the passion economy basically as the digital economy that has risen based on all the individual creators and their desire to produce independent content to support something they're passionate about. So a lot of times, even though it's about individuals, a lot of it was facilitated by the rise of a lot of these platforms that help people publish and disseminate content. Like I said, as an example, Substack, without the very sort of WYSIWYG infrastructure that Substack created, most people who are passionate about a topic or writers don't have the technical expertise or wouldn't invest the time or money to create their own, CMS plus newsletter plus payment system. These were all pretty big barriers of entry. And, when something like Substack comes along and offers that, not only to do it easily, but for free, I think a lot of people, were receptive of that offer. And this is, like I said, seen more than just newsletters. It started with the individuals sort of in the gig economy. You had people, take ostensibly taking charge of sort of their life and earnings more, kind of breaking free of the traditional employer-employee relationship. But now, probably more positively, there's actually opportunities for entrepreneurs to create and disseminate content at a scale and a speed which we've never seen before. So, you have a teacher who previously, had a pretty straightforward relationship. They worked for a school district. They taught at a school. Teachers are interesting because they can't move around due to a lot of like legal and labor restrictions. So a lot of them are kind of forced into like a very specific region. But like now for, some of those same math teachers at like an elementary school who offer like a simple online course in a niche topic, like explaining multiplication or something, or like, 7-figure courses on all these big platforms, Coursera and Podia and all this stuff. So it's really interesting. I think the platforms where you've seen the most growth and contribute the most are a lot of the learning management systems, like I kind of mentioned, but also the sites that have been around a while but just underutilized. Like Gumroad's probably my favorite and the best example. For years has offered the ability for people to sell products for free to anyone, like physical or digital. And then you have players like Stripe come along to take care of the actual payment processing. That's a powerful combination. And there's you add in Etsy and all these different players, and you have this really unique mix of entrepreneurs selling both digital and physical products online that normally someone wouldn't try to make a living off of, or a decent side hustle. But now with 2020 shift, they've kind of taken that plunge. And I guess I'm part of that too, because I was planning on pursuing content marketing and publishing full time anyway. But there's no question that 2020 accelerated things for me. I had like a lot of stuff on the back burner that all of a sudden, I wanted to make sure products I wanted to release, and just different information services. So I think a lot of people, well, 2020 has been a very hard year for, I think the world in general, and especially in the US, there definitely was a small subset of people that had wanted to take the leap and maybe do something entrepreneurial. Maybe they didn't have, the technical background, they weren't going to get a job at like Facebook as a programmer alternatively, but they had ideas, they had a vision, and, they, for the first time, didn't need this expensive infrastructure and team. And so all these solo entrepreneurs decided to make a go of it, since a lot of their jobs were being decimated anyway. So it's definitely been interesting. And I run a lot of online communities, kind of related to mostly writers, but some other entrepreneurial ones too. And hearing the feedback and seeing how many people, who never would have, imagined a year ago they'd quit their job and, become an entrepreneur. It's amazing to see that transformation. So I definitely think it's very empowering.
That group of people, after going to work for 27 years in a row, and then, finding myself plopped down in the middle of what I call the digital wilderness in late May of 2020, it was sink or swim. And so, I got busy and I started, looking around for guideposts. And as I mentioned earlier, you were one of the first guideposts that I found, as well as a number of the other people who are in this series. And it's important to me to, share those resources. The last speaker I was speaking with, Kristen Wilson, and I were talking about you after the call, and we were sort of imagining, how you managed to produce so much content, and whether or not you have this massive team behind you, or what's going on at Casey Inc.
That's fun. That's really funny you mentioned that, because that's like, and it's that itself, addressing that question has been on the back burner because I get asked it all the time. And I think it would be a great blog post or something by it, just by itself. But I'm just simply so busy that ironically, I never get around to it. But the short answer is no, there's not a team behind me. I think one thing I've gotten really good at, and I learned early on when I was doing all the Amazon publishing and everything else, was that I don't have a tech background. I have more of a marketing background. So, I don't try to compete in terms of, developing sort of the latest, products or whatever. But there's enough like codeless, and like I said, sort of, or light code products that you can if you spend a little time learning some basic, HTML, even you can, nowadays throw together a beautiful website, start a community, and basically, I think there is still this like massive opportunity for people to, kind of claim their piece of the, a new American pie or whatever. And there's I always hear people say, oh, everything's been done or tapped out, or this is all a bubble. And I think that's I think that's completely wrong. I think we're just at the early stages of this event. Like you said, this unprecedented amount of content being created, and the demand for it will only continue to grow as more of the world has increased access to internet, period, but like especially high speed internet, which is a major global initiative. So I think that as far as how to churn out a lot of content, a lot of it is that I spend a lot of time looking for feedback based on what people like. I'll release one thing, and I take those emails pretty seriously that I get from people. I don't even always have time to respond, but or like with a lengthy response. But when someone gives me feedback, I try to implement that, and I really try to go where I see there being a need. And I started on Medium, deconstructing Medium, mainly just because I was sort of curious about the platform myself. But it's one of those things where it's very easy to figure out ways to automate a lot of your day-to-day tasks. And like one thing I use a lot is like people say like, how do you balance social media? I really dislike social media personally. I was like an anti-social media person until like I had like zero presence and was very concerned about privacy until about 2 years ago. I had like very consciously not engaged with any platform, which is kind of unusual. I was like one of the last holdouts, and then abruptly overnight, like I was like, if I use this as a proper business tool in moderation, I think I can leverage all this without sort of being sucked in myself. And I think I've had a lot of success with that. I use social media for marketing, but I don't actually spend a lot of time on there. Most of my actions are automated. I try to figure out, how I can do things as simply as possible, because, there is only one of me and I don't, scale very well. So short of some sort of AI advance, I don't know how I would do that. So the main thing is that I put in a lot of time, effort, but I focus on doing things efficiently. I have maybe 18 months of content on like some whiteboards around my office. I can literally, I have like years worth of stuff that I don't even think I'll get to. Like probably by the time I do get to it, it won't be a good idea anymore. So, I feel like some people struggle with finding things to do. I'm definitely like, I count how many opportunities I've missed that were on the board and then somebody else does it. So yeah, but it's a lot of hard work too. I think that, and that's why really those posts are useful to give people a realistic sense of what it takes to make it. And I never like suggest it's easy. But I think that there's something to be said for like transparently like explaining how difficult it is. Because otherwise by omission, people might think it's easy, and it's definitely not. Like people are constantly copying my content too. Like I have a few people on Medium who do that, and it's really frustrating sometimes when I notice like what's essentially a plagiarized piece of content rivaling mine in Google or something for a keyword search. But I've learned to kind of just let that go, and generally, unless they had a team, like figuring out what I'm going to do next and all the content that I churn out. I mean, it's hard to keep up with. That's partly by design. Like, yeah, like I know that the people copying, have an advantage, but Google tends to rank based on quality and originality. So, in the long run, you can win with hard work, but in the short run, it's very frustrating dealing with. Like I said, there's a lot of, there's nothing wrong with taking inspiration. I do that all the time from all sorts of creators, but blatantly copying, work that you put together over hours and hours, it's and not having really any recourse. Yeah. It's tough.
Talk to me about the publishing platforms. Medium. Let's start with Medium.
Right.
Let's move to Substack.
Okay.
Compare and contrast positives, negatives, and just sort of a high level view of how many people are using it. How monthly, daily, yearly.
Yeah, so
and I know that Medium has had like its biggest year ever this year.
they have, and I think so. They kind of Medium, first of all, is a private company, and they take full advantage of that. They very selectively disclose data. Their latest statistics, which I believe are true, if not an understatement almost, are basically that they've sometime in the last few months surpassed 100 million monthly active readers. There's a little bit of like wiggle room in there as to what that actually means, but it's not exactly equivalent to monthly active users. And it doesn't, because the platform is both readers and writers, that sort of is not offering a complete picture, but Medium has massive reach. I think 100 million, they probably really passed that like 6 months ago, just based on, like I said, all the site analytics and I've consulted for Medium actually. So like people have very like openly told me that. So, I've been lucky in a lot of ways that so in general, Medium is pretty much right now the premier free blogging platform. It basically distills the entire blogging process into 3 easy steps. You can write a post and you don't have to worry about creating a blog or a fancy website. It just sort of looks nice aesthetically, like it's a front end user interface. Like I said, it's very WYSIWYG. But now, and then you can, publish it to a built-in audience. And like I said, I don't know the exact, like they don't really release the exact numbers on that audience, but when you include, like I said, all the places that Medium reaches, it's hundreds of millions of people they have access to in some form. So, I mean, where else do you have that sort of reach? And then probably third, most importantly, there's a built-in way to monetize your content, the Medium Partner Program. So not many sites have a way where you can just check a box or flip a button and your content's, automatically monetized, because that's a big struggle for most content creators, especially writers. Writers hate marketing typically. They hate, everything financial, like basically, or what they view as non-creative about the process. And Medium takes that off their plate. And while, the partner program, like I said, is not completely transparent, it is proven in that it's been paying out consistently for, a number of years now. And so like, no, Medium's not a scam. And yes, you can make real money with the Medium Partner Program. Substack, which I had mentioned earlier, even though I mentioned the two together, they are very different actually. Substack offers basically a built-in email marketing system in addition to functioning like a blog. So if I write a post on Substack, I have the option to both publish it as like a public blog post, but also disseminate it to a list of all my followers and as an email. So, and as most content marketers know, email is still like the holy grail of, things you try to access. So Substack was very smart, and they, inserted themselves into that equation and offered this platform for free. And they basically charge a small fee if you enable monetization on your newsletter. And if you do that, you can charge anywhere from I've seen some charging hundreds of dollars per month. And these are newsletters ranging from geopolitical debates of China, and ranging to somebody's just kind of dysfunctional life, or observations about the world going to hell in 2020. There's a couple like that, and people pay a lot of money for it. So it's both informative, but there's also an entertainment aspect on Substack. And those are the two kind of, in my opinion, main platforms that, you kind of see this real big surge in the passion economy. And they're both right now reinventing themselves to compete with one another. Medium revamped its newsletter function, I would assume, for that sole purpose. So it's interesting. And as a creator, I feel like we've benefited because now there's more than one player. They're having to concede, kind of different things to the product creators.
Do you think you would see more borrowing between the two, and other new entrants into the market? I was wondering, while you were talking, where is Medium?
Yeah, definitely.
Draw the line? When are they going to say, we're also going to allow you to offer courses. We're also going to allow you to monetize, a newsletter here. We're also going to allow you to do a subscription model. Where does it end?
It's weird because Medium actually had some of this a few years ago, and the subscription model on a limited basis, but then they, depending on who you ask, they abruptly ended it and severed ties kind of rudely with a lot of small indie media outlets who were charging, readers a monthly subscription. And that was one of Medium's aggressive pivots. And they kind of burned a lot of people doing that. So I kind of was not thinking they'd go back to that again, but I'm sure they will at some point. I don't think that's really they're still just focused on achieving sort of mass growth. And Medium has that luxury because the company has abundant funding from billionaire Twitter and blogger co-founder Ev Williams, who runs the company, plus 150 million in private equity funding. So
right.
It's well capitalized, which is unusual in these small digital publishing companies. Substack doesn't have a ton of funding, but they did get their initial funding, big funding, from Andreessen Horowitz for 15 million. So the implication being that there's a lot of support for what they're doing. So I think they could also last a while, even regardless of whether their business model makes sense in the short run.
So what's interesting about all this from my perspective is, you probably won't remember this, but in the 80s and 90s, print newsletters were really big. And a lot of entrepreneurs, infopreneurs, what they were doing is they were producing weekly or monthly newsletters that they would literally mail from their homes, and they'd be practically mimeographed. But they were, if anybody even remembers what that is. And or they were printed at print shops, and then, direct mail, and, blah, blah, blah. And we saw a massive decline in that around, 2008, 2009, 2010. And at the same time, newspapers were like, how is anybody going to pay for content online? That was the big debate back in 2009, will anybody ever pay for a subscription online again? And now companies like Stripe, and the way that they've made frictionless online transactions so that it's absolutely painless to wave your phone or to, tap a button for, one tap payment. The act of not taking dollars out of your wallet to pay for something has made online transactions feel like you're not
Right.
spending money. And so this increase that we're seeing in online activity all over the place, be it buying furniture from Wayfair or shopping on Amazon or what have you, the e-commerce combined with the digital publishing and the tools and the self-publishing tools has created this remarkable model where suddenly being a newsletter company is a viable business again. You can
Yeah.
support yourself as an infopreneur, whereas there was a good decade there where you could not, you know?
Uh, Definitely. And I think you hit the nail on the head. I think people miss that important point that, yeah, it's the integration with e-commerce that really has I mean, there are great innovations in digital publishing, but it's that in conjunction with, all these, changes in e-commerce that really allowed things to just scale like crazy. I still remember like on my like like you said 2008 I had like niche websites running, and I remember like it was so difficult to get someone's credit card, the concept of getting someone to pay online for something, like even with PayPal, was like a stretch, let alone you're just some random person trying to sell your individual course. It was nearly impossible. And now Gumroad, like, which I think was sort of the leader in this, and I think doesn't get enough credit. They one of the things I love about them is they made the payment form so simple. Depending on your risk profile, you literally just enter the credit card number. You don't even need a name, and like that frictionless form that's just like so easy, and which is processed by Stripe, is just like people don't give that enough credit, but that one innovation and making that process simple is everything. The other way to do it is like basically like you said, like Amazon, where you build up such a critical mass of an audience that you just become synonymous with trust, but that's nearly impossible for everybody else. So like Stripe is in a way sort of, yeah, the anti-Amazon. It really has given that flexibility to individual creators.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that another important aspect of this is the mindset shift in the general population around the idea of paying for content. That there was, a real question 2008, 2009, will anybody pay for content? It's all free. Content is now all free. People used to say that, and they don't say that anymore because of these frictionless transactions and because people have realized that good content is worth paying for.
Right. And I think in there too, you have two things. You have that content, not only it became so abundant that, it wasn't so much about finding content as it was the right content, obviously. So now you have people, traditional media, models fail because they tend to be too broad. They can't charge for, very broad sort of like news and information. But you have a very niche publication or something that offers somebody immediate value, whether it's, like I said, entertainment or like something relating to their business or professional life, and people can justify all of a sudden paying for this. That's sort of the value proposition I make with my own newsletter. When you sign up, not only do you get premium posts, but I have like a whole slew of products that from day one you can download. And like those products all sell for like in total like $350, and that's bundled in, so I think a lot of people are starting to get that idea and realizing that, if you can provide people with demonstrable value, then, it can be worth it. And, there's a lot of ways to do that. But yeah, especially, like I said, the scalability of all this in the digital realm makes it just infinitely easier to actually achieve profitability. I mean, I literally can run like a massive, I have like I think 15 newsletters. Like I only really advertise one or two, but I'm always experimenting. Like that's what most people don't see behind the scenes, is like at least half my time is working on things that never will be associated with me or even end up getting published, but just me trying to experiment. And like with Substack, a few of my like anonymous ones, I've been amazed at the reception they've, gotten. And like I said, the reach and sort of disaggregation of the traditional news media. You don't have these burdensome cost structures anymore. You can just have, it's like the printing press kind of all over again. It really did give people a lot of freedom. So I think there's a lot of that too. I don't think. Oh, what's that?
Hence the digital renaissance. Like the printing press.
You're exactly right. I think people use that just sort of broadly, but I think specifically, yeah, it when you especially use Substack, it very much feels, they try to drive that home too in their marketing that, you have this like basically digital printing press of your own. And so it's pretty, pretty amazing. I think the key thing to remember though, people still question this at all levels. Like, even though you're right, people used to say nobody will pay for any like content or your newsletter. And now like they've been proven wrong. Like people concede, well, in some cases, whatever, there are exceptions. But the truth of the matter is people still believe largely that like, yeah, that trend won't continue. And really all the evidence points the other way. There's basically, I say this only because for anyone watching, there's so much opportunity still, and we're still at such an early stage. I mean, the platform that you end up making your money on may not even be invented yet. It probably hasn't. And I kind of felt that way with, I did Medium for fun. I never expected to make any money really on there. It was just sort of a fun creative outlet. But like I said, same with Substack. I didn't think anybody would pay to hear my insights about blogging. And, I was happy to prove myself wrong. And, I actually I have a digital, an LED, like 3-digit counter, like that counts up to like 999. And I press this big comical button every time I get a new subscriber, a paid subscriber. And when you view it from that perspective, going back to the Kevin Kelly's 1,000 True Fan theory, I mean, I'm 25. I started this in February, this newsletter. It hasn't even been a year yet. And, this thing's already 25% of the way to being like a self-sustaining full-time income. Like to me, that's just phenomenal. Like I would have been happy with like 10 people signing up. So, I never anticipated that. So, I think that you got to experiment and try a lot of these platforms because you just never really know what will work. A lot of my audience on Substack came from Medium, but they, could have purchased products and insights on, previously in another way on Medium, but they never did. So, the conversion of those followers and readers like is different on Substack and other platforms. Right now I'm building like a couple different websites, and yeah, like it's definitely interesting to see because you can kind of guess all you want, but yeah, until you go out and create content and disseminate it across all these platforms, you don't really know where it's going to land, and you don't know what impact it'll have. But I mean, even if you're not trying to build like a public, like a sort of a digital brand, just for like I said, I came from like more the PR side of it. The ability to just leverage your reputation, even within your existing industry, is tremendous. I know people, and I too get like leads that I can't follow up with all the time through like LinkedIn. People are like, hey, I saw this article. I love this. And the amount of business opportunities that I've had to be really deliberate and careful to say no to because I don't want to stop creating, you know, all this unique content. But to be honest, it's been hard. Like, as you start to get a little bit of success on your own, that's when, you know, you start to see like basically people who are trying to suck you back into trading your time for money. And it's tough to kind of say no to that. But I think a lot of people, like I said, especially during the pandemic, realized that the truth, which is that you're, you know, that proposition, uh, it never really was accurate to begin with. You know, the promise of the payment for money was always more fragile than people realized. And like I said, during the pandemic, a lot of people saw their jobs disappear overnight. And it was a rare case where if you were an entrepreneur in the digital space, all of a sudden, you know, you might be killing it after years of people telling you it was impossible. So it's really interesting.
Yeah, it's amazing things are happening online. Listen, we're about at time, so what I want to do is I want to give you an opportunity to to present an offer for how people can find you, how they can read you, how they can connect with you, what and if you want to offer anything free, we're more than happy to take it.
Yeah, okay. Well, if anyone's interested in learning more about any of the topics that I discussed today, my main sort of blogging website is bloggingguide.org, and my Substack newsletter, the one I referenced, is bloggingguide.substack.com. And I also, if you're interested in Medium specifically, about 2 months ago released sort of what I marked as the first affordable Medium course. And for, you know, listeners of this, I'd be happy to offer a significant discount on that. So I'll include that in the link below.
That's amazing.
But I also have just that good. Is that okay, or
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. I think that's
does that work, or?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I didn't know if that was what you wanted.
No,
Yeah.
that's what we want. We you know, how to connect, and if there's anything free or anything discounted, you know, that's great too. You know, things that are going to help people along this journey, you know, figuring out direction, where to go, what to do, all that's good, you know, and it's thrilling.